The Pastry War. It sounds like something out of a comedy sketch, right? A food fight that got way, way out of hand. But believe it or not, this was a real international conflict with actual navies, blockades, and casualties. And that really is the heart of the matter, isn't it? Can a few trashed cakes and some looted croissants actually be the spark that ignites cannon fire between two whole countries? Well, the answer is kinda. It's complicated. Because just look at this. This painting is not a squabble over eclairs. This is the French Navy blasting the heck out of the fortress of San Juan de Ulua in Mexico. So while pastries gave the war its very memorable name, the real story, as you can imagine, goes a whole lot deeper. Now, its official name, the First French Intervention in Mexico, is a little less catchy. It was a pretty short but intense conflict, lasting just a little over 3 months. And it all kicked off with a demand for cash. All right, so let's meet the man at the center of it all, at least symbolically. This is Monsieur Remontel. He was a French pastry chef living near Mexico City, and he had a major grievance. He claimed that way back in 1832, some rowdy Mexican army officers trashed and looted his shop. His complaint eventually made its way all the way to the King of France and became the poster child for the whole conflict. But yeah, as we've said, it was never really just about the pastries. To get why France would send warships over a baker's complaint, we've got to look at the real ingredients that were brewing up trouble between these two nations. You have to understand, in the years after gaining its independence, Mexico was in a constant state of chaos. There was widespread civil unrest, and businesses getting looted was, unfortunately, pretty common. Now, if you were a foreigner and your shop got wrecked, good luck getting any money back from the struggling Mexican government. It just wasn't happening. So what did they do? They started writing home to their own governments, asking for help. And then, of course, there was the money. France was a huge trade partner with Mexico, but it felt like it was getting a seriously raw deal. See, the US and the UK had already locked in these sweet trade agreements for themselves. Meanwhile, French goods, they were getting slammed with way higher taxes. And that kind of financial squeeze was causing a ton of tension. So you've got this really unstable situation, simmering trade disputes. It's like a powder keg just waiting for a spark. Let's dig into how France took a bunch of money complaints and cranked the heat all the way up to a full-blown military attack. Okay, let's circle back to Monsieur Remontel's little pastry shop. By all estimates, the actual value of the place was less than 1,000 pesos. We're talking about a small, humble business. But Remontel didn't ask for 1,000 pesos. Oh no, he demanded 60,000 pesos. That is an insane 60 times the value of his entire shop. This wasn't about getting a new oven and some flour. This was a lottery ticket. And France didn't just stop with him. They took Remontel's wild claim, bundled it up with a whole list of other complaints from other French citizens, and slapped Mexico with a massive ultimatum. Cough up a grand total of 600,000 pesos or else. And when Mexico refused to pay, which, I mean, can you blame them? France made good on that threat. A French fleet sailed right across the Atlantic, set up a blockade on Mexico's most important ports, and then went ahead and captured Veracruz. It was only after all that, after being invaded, that Mexico officially declared war on France. And if you just look at the numbers, you can see this was a bit of a mismatch. France rolled up with a modern navy and 4,000 troops. Mexico was basically just defending a single fort, led by the one and only, the infamous General Antonio López de Santa Anna. The casualties show it was definitely a real fight, but the technology and firepower were clearly on the French side. Oh, and speaking of Santa Anna, his involvement in this war gives us one of the absolute wildest, most bizarre, and completely true stories in all of military history. And it's all about his leg. So get this, Santa Anna was actually in political retirement, just chilling on his estate when the war started. But the second he heard that French troops were storming the beaches at Veracruz, as you can see in this picture, he saw his chance. He immediately offered his services to go and defend the nation. So here's what happens, and you really can't make this stuff up. During the fighting, Santa Anna gets hit badly in the leg by French cannon fire. The leg has to be amputated. But instead of just, getting rid of it, he orders his amputated leg to be buried with full military honors. We're talking a parade, a fancy coffin, speeches, the whole shebang. He then brilliantly used his very dramatic war wound as a huge piece of propaganda to paint himself as a national hero who sacrificed his own body for Mexico, which helped him ride a giant wave of popularity right back into the presidency. Incredible. So after all the fighting and the leg funeral, the war did eventually come to an end. But the peace treaty that got signed left behind, let's just say, a really bitter aftertaste that would basically poison the relationship between France and Mexico for decades. Mexico was in a tough spot. Its main port was blockaded, its trade was crippled, so they finally agreed to talk. Great Britain stepped in to play mediator, and on March 9, 1839, a peace treaty was signed. The Pastry War was officially over. And on paper, the terms seemed pretty straightforward. Mexico finally caved and agreed to pay the full 600,000 pesos. In exchange, France got some promises for better trade deals down the road and agreed to pull its troops out. Looked like a clear win for France, right? Well, there was just one tiny little problem. Mexico never actually paid the 600,000 pesos. The debt just sat there. And this, right here, is the biggest takeaway from this whole story. That unpaid debt from the so-called Pastry War became a major reason France used to justify invading Mexico again about 20 years later, in 1861. And that second invasion wasn't just a brief blockade. It was a massive, bloody, multi-year war designed to completely overthrow the Mexican government. So, in the end, a ruined pastry shop didn't really start a war, but it sure did make for the perfect excuse. It was a small injustice that got blown completely out of proportion and used to justify some serious military and economic aggression. And it really leaves you with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What seemingly small debts or minor disputes happening right now are just simmering under the surface, waiting for some powerful group to fan them into the major conflicts of tomorrow?